We will begin the session with National Anthem. Ladies and gentlemen, please be attentive for the National Anthem. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. To start this informative session with the name of Allah, I would like to invite Mr. Najam for the recitation of the Holy Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والتين والزيتون وطور سينين وهذا البلد الأمين لقد خلقنا الإنسان في أحسن تقويم ثم رددناه أسفل سافلين إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات فلهم أجر غير ممنون فما يكذبك بعد بالدين أليس الله بأحكم الحاكمين صدق الله العظيम। तर्जमा। शुरू करता हूँ अल्लाह के नाम से जो बड़ा मेहरबान और नहायत रहम वाला है। कसम है इंजीर की और जैतून की और तूरी सीनीन की और उस अमन वाले शहर की। यकीनन हमने इंसान को बेहतरीन सूरत में पैदा किया, फिर उसे नीचों से नीचा कर दिया। लेकिन जो लोग ईमान लाए और फिर नेक अमल किए तो उनके लिए ऐसा अजर है जो कभी ख़त्म ना होगा। बस तुझे अब रोज़ जज़ा के जुटलाने पर कौन सी चीज़ आमादा करती है? क्या अल्लाह ताला सब हाकिमों का हाकिम नहीं? सदक़ल्लाहुल अज़ीम। आमीन।
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon. I welcome you all, honorable guest speaker, faculty members, students, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you all are doing great and safe with your families. I, Maria Azam, alongside Mr. Hannan Nasir, shall be your host for today's session. It is our great pleasure and the first and foremost duty on behalf of our university to extend our gracious and exclusive welcome to all of you. So the topic of today's session is Islam and Psychology, the Undiscovered Discoveries.
I'm your host Hanan Nasir. Those who have any queries or questions related to today's topic, they can forward them in the chat box to participant named questions only for question answer session. And those who have joined through Facebook, they will also drop their questions in the comment section. We will take those questions at the end. Now coming towards the topic of today's session, Islam and Psychology. Psychology in Islam is used in everyday practices, but under different guises, such as spiritualism. Islam values the importance of good mental health and emotional well being. The Quran can be used as a guide to those suffering from emotional distress and aims to lead people to a meaningful quality of life. It is stated in Surah Al Fal, Allah will never change the state of people until they change themselves.
Is not being able to pray or not being able to perform Islamic duties in front of others, or finding it hard to follow Islamic obligations on some days a sign of weak iman or just an issue of mental health? To address and answer these crucial questions, I would like to extend a special welcome to our guest of honor, Dr. Fahad Khan, to Air University.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, sir. Dr. Fahad Khan is a US-based researcher, clinician, and academician. He is Hafiz-e-Qur'an, Islamic scholar, and licensed clinical psychologist. He has multiple master degrees, and multiple research papers have been written by him, which are based on Iqbal. Moreover, he is deputy director at Al Khalil Organization, which is an international association of Islamic psychology, a non-profit organization in US that provides free treatment to Muslims who are unable to pay the expenses. They have 10 to 15 offices in US and one office in Turkey. Now, I would like to hand over the floor to our honorable guest. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much. Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala, wa tu'izzu man tasha, wa tudillu man tasha, biyadika al-khayr. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. First of all, thank you so much to the Air University's protocol team. MashaAllah, you guys have done a wonderful job. I see a lot of people that have joined us because I wanted to understand some dilemmas that I grew up with as I was educating myself and I was studying psychology and Islamic studies. By the way, I'm not a scholar. You know, I'm a student of Islamic knowledge, so I don't consider myself a scholar at all. And even though I have my master's and my doctorate degrees, but, you know, alhamdulillah, I still consider myself a student. I learn something every day. But the question that I wanted to put forth, and, you know, whoever here can unmute themselves, feel free to do that, is why has there been a battle or a divide or a contradiction between Islam and science? So I don't know, like I said, if you can ask other people in your team to unmute, that would be even better. But if the two of you who can respond, you know, this is a test and quiz for you. So answer this question from you, or try to answer. It's a trick question, by the way. But why has there been a struggle or a battle or a divide or a contradiction between Islam and science? So go ahead.
Sir, I think it's just because Muslims aren't balancing Islam and science. They are either more concerned towards science or Islam.
Okay, that's a pretty good answer. Okay. What do you think, Hanan? I want to know about your response too. You're the only other person that I can see, so.
Sir, same answer. I think they think Islam and sciences are different things, and they dealt with it different things, like different things. Some are concerned with Islam, some are very concerned about science. So I think.
Okay, I see. I think other people have raised their hand. Fatima and other, if they also can unmute themselves, I'd like to hear their response to this question as well, please.
Sir, I believe that maybe due to mostly Muslims have a very narrow mind and a strict thinking, and they don't allow science to overtake them. Maybe that's why there's a division.
Okay.
Or maybe the people from the science, they divided between them and Islam.
Okay, so you're talking about like what people have done, but what about innately between religion and between science? We know there's a battle that exists now, but why has this battle existed in the history? Anyone else wants to share their thoughts, please?
Sir, someone has texted in chat that science is fully developed. Drawing kids usually argue.
Okay, I see. So the reason I'm putting forth this question is because this is a question that many people now in the West and also in the Muslim world struggle with. This is a question that is often asked, and a question that a lot of people who are right now in, you know, you guys are students, mashallah, those who are watching who were students or who will be students, this is a question that you will go through. We have a dilemma, unfortunately, that we are facing right now, where we have to pick between sacred versus secular, right? Sacred knowledge, which, from our perspective is Quran and Sunnah, and then secular knowledge, which could be like, like modern day science and history and technology. We have to choose sometimes between, what Ibn Taymiyyah, for example, has talked about, aql or naql, right? So he says aql like rationality, and naql would be like Quran and Sunnah. So a question that Fakhruddin Razi asked is another question that I'll ask you. So if you have something that's rational, something that makes sense, something that's logical, right? But it contradicts with the Quran, it contradicts with something that's in Islam. Okay, what will you do? So this is the second question now. So I'm going to pick on Maria again, because I know you hate your video, but you can't hide from these questions. So you have to answer this question. What will you do if you have a contradiction between rationality or sacred knowledge that we have from Quran and Sunnah?
So what's the difference?
So one, like something that makes sense, something that's rational, right? Something that like your mind, it makes sense to you. But let's say that you hear something in the Quran or Hadith, and then and the two of them don't they don't jive, they don't work together. There's some collision, some contradiction happening. In that situation, what would you do? What would be your course of action?
Sir, I will obviously read from Quran as well as science.
Okay.
So if I'm not getting answer from Quran,
okay,
the reason or the logic, so I will move towards science, but I will keep a balance between Islam and science. Not I will not do this. I'm just considering Quran, that according to our religion, according to our belief, we have to keep faith in Quran, Islam and Quran and Sunnah.
Okay.
But we also have to take science aside along with the Islam.
Okay.
So I will balance between these two.
Okay.
I will not consider one.
Okay.
At a time.
Okay. Now I think somebody else raised their hand. Irfan, I wonder what he has to share. Can you unmute him?
So, but I think there is some relation between science and technology. Like many things defined in science and technology are proved in Quran. So there is some relation between it. So I think we should go with Quran. But if the things are in science are proved in Quran, then we should believe it.
Okay. Okay, I see. But what you're saying is what a lot of Muslims would say. They would say that we're going to choose Quran or the divine knowledge, especially Quran, and we're going to reject rationality, because for us Quran is the word of God, right?
Exactly.
But look at what Fakhruddin Razi says. Fakhruddin Razi says that you can't do that, because if you reject rationality, you are indirectly rejecting Quran, because it is through our rationality and our logic that we actually accept Quran as the word of God. Okay, it is through our rationality and logic that we come to know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists, right? The existence of God is not something that you can be taught. When you're young, you can teach a child Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists, Allah is Ghaffar, and you can teach all the things, but that has to be internalized. It has to be something that somebody takes in and somebody accepts. It's not something that you can be taught and you memorize and you repeat back. It's not a transmitted knowledge. It's an internalized, intellectualized knowledge. So he says that you cannot reject rationality. Now, what do you do in that case? So coming back to my first question, which was a trick question. My question was, why has there been a contradiction between Islam and science? And the answer to that question is that there has never been any contradiction, any battle, any divide between Islam and science. This issue of religion versus science is a dilemma that was created by the Christians. It was a dilemma that was created in the West. It is a dilemma that we Muslims have adopted and we have taken on as our own, unfortunately. So what happened to us in our country, especially after colonialism, but even before that, the reason that we had a decline, well, let's go back before the decline. Why did we have the golden era of Islam? People talk about the golden era of Islam. What did all of these amazing philosophers, if you look at Ibn Sina, for example, if you look at Farabi, for example, you look at Razi, there were two Razis. There was first Zakaria, Ibn Zakaria, Muhammad Razi, and there was then Fakhruddin Razi. If you look at all of these people, how were they able to achieve so much in their lifetime, right? And why is it that Muslims can't do it now? One of the reasons why there are many reasons, but one of the reasons why they were able to do that was because they didn't reject knowledge that existed in time and place. They didn't say, oh, we have Quran and we have Hadith, we don't need any knowledge. They took from all the Greek thinkers, right? They took philosophers, they took all from the Hellenistic philosophers, they translated all of that, and they were able to further expound on it, right? Without having any issue, without having any problem with it. Why is it that right now, that if you have on one hand, you have somebody who's a Molvi, like, you can call me a Molvi if you want, but on one hand, you have a Molvi, on the other hand, you have a scientist, and somehow there's a battle between the two. Why do we have that divide now when that divide never existed in our history? Islam always encouraged us to seek knowledge. Rasulullah ﷺ said, Al-hikmatu dallatul mu'min, that wisdom is the lost commodity of a believer, right? And then فَإِنَّمَا وَجِدُهَا فَهُوَ أَحَقُّ بِهَا, wherever he finds it, he has the right over it. It's not like, oh, he can take it if he wants. He has the right over it. So if Donald Trump says something that is wise, me as a Muslim, as a believer, I can take it. I can use it. I don't have to think, oh, but it's Trump. I don't like Trump, or Trump is racist, or whatever nonsense. If Charles Darwin said something that's wise, I can take it. I don't have to think, like, is this something that, no. But what I need, and what the earlier scholars had, was they had a strong foundation. They had a strong connection with Allah. All of these people that existed in the past, we call them polymaths. Why do we call them polymaths? Because they weren't just doctors or engineers or lawyers, right? Or, like whatever profession, psychologists. They were Hafiz-e-Qur'an, they were scholars, they studied their deen first, right? Their foundation was strong. Then they took on whatever they could. So they had a filter. They were able to filter through that, whatever went through that filter, which is, if you look at psychology now, 90%, 95% of the psychology is Islamic psychology. There is no Islamic psychology and Western or non-Islamic or kafir psychology. There's no such thing. We use that term just to make, for the sake of argument and discussion. But the fact of the matter is that all psychology, all knowledge is Islamic knowledge. If there's some part of it that doesn't fit through that filter, then we reject it. We say it doesn't fit. But even going back to that original question, in Islam, we have to look at something. There's something called, when you look at Islamic epistemology, right, the study of knowledge, we look at what are our sources of knowledge? Where do we get our knowledge from as Muslims? Okay, and for us Muslims, there are three sources of knowledge. Okay, and all of us should know these three sources of knowledge. Okay, the first, which is probably the most obvious one to us, and the ones that we can easily say, is Quran and Sunnah, right? Now that falls under the category of what's called khabar sadiq, or truthful reports, right? And that's through Quran and Sunnah. So, Quran or Hadith, and then the other part could be like, ilmul ghaib that comes, but regardless of that, that's one part, khabar sadiq, okay? The second part of knowledge, the second source of knowledge, is what's called reason or aql, right? If something makes sense to you, if something is logical, you don't need Quran and Sunnah to prove it. Do you see what I'm saying? So if, for example, gravity, right? We know gravity exists. If you're an engineering student, all the formulas, F equals ma. That's a fact. That it makes sense to you. If you're an engineering student, you don't need to have Quran and Sunnah to prove that to you, right? The third source of knowledge is what's called empirical evidence or sensory evidence. Through our senses, we gather evidence. You can put gravity in that as well, because you see something falling down and that becomes part of your knowledge. Now, here's the thing that people don't understand and Muslims fail to understand. This is why people a lot of times struggle, is that in Islam, all three sources of knowledge are equally valued, okay? All three of them are equally valued. Somehow we Muslims think that Quran and Sunnah comes above everything and else. No, it's not like. In fact, Quran and Sunnah will fall through. All of it will come together like this beautiful, composition. When you have this like a beautiful composition that comes together, you have all of these instruments that are playing, and this is how three of them work. Now, scholars said if there is ever a ta'arrud, they say if there's ever a contradiction between the three, then what do? Then they have a methodology behind it. They say you can either have a reconciliation between the two that are contradicting, you can have an abrogation, a nasakh, or you can have something called a ta'wil, like interpretation. You might have to go back to the hadith or the Quranic ayah and see perhaps there's something that's missing from the interpretation. Okay. Now, one comment that Hanan made, which a lot of people make that, and to a certain degree, it's fine. Like we say that there's so many miracles that are found in the Quran, but there's a problem with scientific miracles in the Quran, or taking Quran as a miracle because of science. Science changes every day. What existed 100 years ago, or not, let's say 1,000 years ago, doesn't exist anymore. If you read what Ibn Sina wrote in his books of medicine, which was used in his canon of medicine, he talked about the way the way they saw the body. They don't see the human body the same way right now. So for us Muslims, we don't have to look at the scientific miracles of the Quran to believe it. Just like we don't have to look at the miracles of fasting. Some people compare fasting to like intermittent fasting, the benefits of fasting, how fasting can make your health better, and like glucose and diet. No, all that might be a benefit, but that's not why we accept fasting as what we're supposed to do. So interpretation has to be taken into consideration. The other thing I want to mention about knowledge is that there's two types of knowledge that are within the Islamic realm when it comes to psychology, right? So when it comes to psychology, if you were to bifurcate into two different categories, one category is that which we call qat'i knowledge, right? It's definitive. Okay. So for example, when you look at psychology, now we know as Muslims in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about ruh. There's something called ruh inside of us. We know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says there's something called nafs inside of us, right? Most people know nafsul amara, nafsul lawama, nafsul mutmainna. These are three different states of nafs Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes in the Quran. Some scholars have mentioned 7 different states. Okay, that's qat'i knowledge, is that we know ruh exists, we know nafs exists, we know jinns exist, right? Because it's in the Quran. There's a whole surah named after jinn, like after the jinns. Then comes something called dhanni, which is the opposite side of qat'i. Dhanni is what's called probabilistic knowledge. Okay, what is dhanni knowledge here? So for example, not much is known about the ruh. We know very little. There's some verses from the Quran that talk about the ruh. Nafs, we know that there's 3 stages. Some philosophers in the past said that ruh and nafs are the same thing. They made that conclusion, and that's perfectly fine. I personally think that ruh and nafs are 2 opposite entities. That's perfectly fine. Our iman doesn't change if we believe in ruh and nafs being 2 separate entities, right? Now, a lot of the popular belief in the Indian subcontinent and all over the Muslim world is that, jinns can possess you, right? Now, I don't know if you know, but there's some scholars who actually say that it's not possible for jinns to possess you because it's not in the Quran, right? That jinns can possess you. We know that jinns exist, but can they possess human beings? It's debated. Some people say they can, some people say they can't. Our iman doesn't change whether they can or they can't. But if somebody says, oh, jinns don't exist, if somebody says, no, ruh doesn't exist, nafs doesn't exist, then that's qat'i knowledge, and we can't accept that. Okay. The third divide of knowledge that I want us to understand before we go into, some of the questions that you were sent to me, I'm trying to answer all of them, in a way that's more linear. So the third the divide of knowledge we have to understand is this division between knowledge that is internalized, like I was saying before about knowledge of Allah, versus knowledge that is transmitted. So let me give you an example that you can understand easily. Let's look at the subject of history, for example. Okay, if you're told history, something about a history of Pakistan or history of the world, World War II, whatever it is. If I ask you, how do you know? You say, because we read it in a book. Somebody who wrote the book, somebody told them. It's transmitted knowledge. It came to you through some kind of transmission. Okay, but what about math, right? If I said to you, why is 2 plus 2 equals 4? You can't say because my teacher told me. You can't say because it says in the book, right? 2 plus 2 equals 4 is because that's what it is. It's knowledge that is intellectualized and internalized. Does that make sense what I'm saying, right? There's a difference between the two. So we have to understand that for us, there's going to be always these two types of knowledge. Knowledge about God, knowledge about love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like what is our purpose in this life? Why do we exist here? Like what is suffering? What is depression, anxiety? Why does all this happen over here? Our life, what existed before we were born, what will exist after we will die. All of this is internalized, intellectualized knowledge. You can read all the books. I can give you all the lectures. We can sit here all night or all day for you. But this is not something that you can transmit and you can take and memorize and it will make sense to you. It has to be internalized. It has to be experienced. Does that make sense? Hanan is the only one here who I can see. So I'm going to ask him to shake his head if it's making any sense.
Exactly, sir.
Okay.
But you're right.
Sir, you truly make sense.
Okay, please.
Right.
Again, if you have any questions, feel free to jump in and ask, or you can ask. You can also type in I can't see the questions here, but if you type in the questions, hopefully I can see. If you make me a co-host, maybe I can see the chat, and that way I can see what people are typing and respond to them as well. I promise not to end the session for you. Okay. Okay. So knowing all of that, now one of the questions that was asked was, how do you know right versus wrong? Right? The knowledge about right versus wrong is a very challenging knowledge. Some things we know in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us, this is right and this is wrong, haqq and batil. But everything else is something that is, it's subjective. For one person, something might be right. For somebody else, something might be wrong. I do couples counseling. A husband and wife, they both have arguments with each other. They come to me, they sit in front of me. I ask the husband, okay, tell me what happened. Explain to me the situation from your perspective. He tells me the story. I listen to him. Well, that makes perfect sense. I can see why you were upset. Okay, I asked the wife, tell me what happened. Tell me the story from your perspective. She tells me the story from her perspective. It makes perfect sense. I can see why you're upset. So who's right and who's wrong? Can both of them be right? Of course. Can both of them be wrong? Of course. So we have to move out of this mindset of that I am right and you're wrong. You go on social media right now, people cannot somehow let go of this idea of that I can be wrong, that our own ego and nafs has gone to a point that we sometimes cannot get beyond this idea of I'm right and I'm wrong, or I'm right and you're wrong. This is one of the reasons why the mental health system is failing. This was the other question that was asked, that why is it that we're having so many mental health problems? Depression, anxiety, suicide is on the rise. And what's more interesting? If you look at the United States, if you look at the Western countries, look at Australia, look at any of the European countries, it has one of the worst mental health problems in the world. You have to ask the question, why? These are countries where we have knowledge that is being developed in psychology. We have the most amount of research that happens. Most money goes into the field of psychology, right? But why is it that people are still killing themselves? Why is it that people are still depressed and people still have anxiety? That's a question you have to ask. And I will give you my hypothesis of that. But before I do want to ask if you have any questions, if anybody has any questions.
Yes, sir, let me ask some questions.
Please.
Sir, there is a question. If a person is facing severe obsessive compulsion disorder and find it difficult to recite some verses due to psychological disorder, what should that person do to overcome this?
So the first part, because if they're suffering from which disorder?
Sir, obsessive-compulsive disorder.
Compulsive disorder. Okay. Yeah, I received that question, and inshallah I'll get to that question. Because I want to make sure we're sticking to the topic, but I will address that question towards the end, inshallah. But are there any questions related to what I said so far? Okay, I'm going to take that as a no. Okay, so let's move on now, right? So one of the reasons why mental health in the West is failing is because the theories that, okay, so now let's go back to how did the Muslims, now by the way, Muslims have done a lot of work. Speaking of OCD or obsessive compulsive disorder, I don't know if you know, but if you pick up a psychology book and look at who was the founder, who was the person that came up with obsessive compulsive disorder, oftentimes the credit is given to somebody from the 18th century, okay? but one of the first person to identify obsessive-compulsive disorder was a man named by Abu Zayd al-Balkhi, who lived in the 9th century. Okay, he now, one of my colleagues, her name is Dr. Rania Awad from Stanford University. She actually visited Lahore with me 2 years ago. She published a paper where she looked at Abu Zayd al-Balkhi's identification of symptoms of OCD from 9th century and compared it to the modern symptoms of OCD and their exact match. So Muslims were able to accomplish something in the 9th century what now the West is accomplishing right now. Why? Because again, the Muslims did not have this battle of sacred versus secular. They didn't have this struggle of, oh, this is Islamic knowledge, Islamic psychology or non-Muslim psychology. Christians at the time did. When the Christians at the time had this people with mental disorder, what did they do? They killed them, they burned them, they put them in, they locked them up. They did not do any treatment to them. They didn't try to understand what was going on with them. They saw that as a sign of a weakness. So, going back to like, why is the mental health in the West, not effective, and why is it failing? One of the reasons is because the theories that have developed in the West developed as a means or through the means of worldviews, right? So my mindset, your mindset, the way we think, the way we perceive things, the way we idealize stuff, how we approach something, how we behave, has a lot to do with the world that we live in, right? If the worldview is a certain way, our mind is going to act through the same way, okay? So all of these theories, now if you look at Sigmund Freud, right? For example, now there was a time when, there wasn't much attention given to little children. Little children were considered evil. In the Christian theology, there's a concept of original sin, that all people are born with original sin. The only way you can get out of that original sin, the original sin is associated with Adam and Eve, right? They say that because they ate the forbidden fruit, it's the original sin, everybody's born with it. So in order to get out of it, you have to be baptized. So children were considered evil. There wasn't much care given to children. So Sigmund Freud, his theory is very negative towards children, right? He says little children have aggressive drives, they have sexual drives, they're born with this evil inside of them. Okay, he was influenced by his own worldview. You move forward with other people now. There was a movement, this is called cognitive movement. There was a focus on thoughts. Then there was a behavioral movement. There was a focus on what's out there. Then people started thinking, oh no, people can be positive, people can be good. People have the capacity to self-actualize. There's a guy named Maslow, you've heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. He was a humanistic. Humanistic psychology comes from that idea that people are good. Why? Because the worldview was now changing. Philosophers were now thinking differently about how human beings are. Now the field of psychology is more biological. It's more reductionistic. If you have depression, they look at you like, okay, well, you have a chemical imbalance. Neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, these are different in your body. So they try to treat you through medication. They try to give you CBT, which is a very short 8 sessions, focus on thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, and you should be okay. It doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Because the approach is not grounded in something that is as strong as what we had as Muslims. We as Muslims had something that's divine knowledge. How can you understand a human being through just thoughts and emotions? How can you categorize something as deep as depression, right? I mean, I'll just give you one example. There are some Sufis who say that depression in this world is natural because it is our longing to meet with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So they say that part of this world is going to entail you being depressed. There's a hadith of the Prophet where he said, "Ad-dunya sijnul mu'min wa jannatul kafir," that this world is a prison for the believer. You're not going to be happy in the prison, right? The anxiety, like what is anxiety? Allama Iqbal said, "Farebe nazar hai sukun o sabat, तड़पता है हर ज़र्रा कायनात," right? ठहरता नहीं कारवाने वजूद कि हर लहज़ा है ताज़ा शान वजूद, समझता है तू राज है ज़िंदगी फ़क़त ज़ौक़ परवाज़ है ज़िंदगी. The idea that anxiety is an essential part of our existence. This is who we are, right? So how can you conceptualize depression or anxiety using a small model, which is, if you look up CBT, You know, you can pick up a small book on CBT and understand it in two days. That's how small it is. You can't do that. This is why the mental health system in the West is failing. The problem is people that are living in the East, people that are living in Pakistan, students that are living in the Pakistan. What do we do? I mean, I'm a Pakistani, so I'm going to put myself in your shoes right now. Because of colonialism, we take whatever the West gives us and we swallow it as a whole. We don't even question. We don't even say, oh, but maybe, but what if it's wrong? We see someone, you know, I can speak Urdu, but my Urdu is not that strong. My English is stronger. That's why I use English. But the reality is, if somebody's speaking English, he's taking more seriously. If somebody's white, you know, he's taken more seriously. That is a fact, right? So I have seen this in my own eyes. Universities in Pakistan will invite, you know, when I was in my doctoral program, I would see, you know, some symposium in Pakistani universities happening and on psychology. So I was intrigued, you know, this is a beautiful symposium. Who's being invited there? And I would see some like names, some white names, okay? And then I would look these people up, you know, from this university in America, that university in America. Now, I would think that if you're going to invite somebody from the United States to come to Pakistan, pay for his airfare, his stay, pay for him to speak, he must be some expert, must be somebody who's done a lot of research, a lot of work. When you look up the profile, the person hasn't done much. The only reason he's being invited is because he's white and he speaks English. That's the mindset that we have. We take whatever the West offers us and we swallow it and we don't ask any questions. And then when our religion tells us something, you know, like, unfortunately, like I said, you can call me a mullah too, but when the mullah says something about anything about psychology or anything about health, we say, oh, no, these guys, they don't know anything, they're backward, they have nothing to offer to us. This is the divide that was created. There is no divide between secular and sacred. There's no divide between religion and science, and Islam and science. And we have to get this out of our heads, okay? Now, if there's something that that Islam hasn't offered, Islam can't teach us how to take a rocket to the moon. That's fine. Like, we don't have to search through the Quran to find a verse to do that. Islam encourages us, go seek knowledge. The first word is iqra. It's a command, right? Iqra means go and read, right? That is a command. So we're supposed to seek that knowledge. That's what we're meant to do. We're supposed to go learn how to build a rocket and how to go to the moon. We're not going to go back to the hadith and the Quran to figure that part out. Okay? So that's the dilemma that Muslims in the East have. That's the dilemma all over. If you look at Muslims living in the subcontinent, if you look at Muslims that are in the Middle East and other places. Yes, Maria, so you have a question.
Sir, there's a question from one of the participants who is asking, sir, how does Islam define subconscious and superconscious mind? Like spirituality, or we can say such a khab.
Oh, so you're talking about dreams, okay. So from an Islamic perspective, you have to understand though, there's a world that we live in that exists that I can see, you can see, that's a physical world. This is a small part of our existence. You know, there is a metaphysical world. Now, even science will tell you that too, right? Like, for example, science can't measure love. Science can't measure supernatural experiences, right? These exist all the time. You know, what is the sixth sense, right? Science can never measure that. The placebo effect is a very interesting phenomenon. What is the placebo effect? Like, if I gave you some medicine and you had headache and I said, this medicine will fix your headache, proven to fix your headache. And it's made out of sugar. It's not even real medicine. You take it, your headache will get fixed. That's the placebo effect, right? It works like so in such an amazing way, science can't explain it. So there's a world that exists that we cannot see. That's the metaphysical realm. The subconscious exists in that realm as well. Now, Sigmund Freud said that, you know, this is part of the psychology that we can accept from Sigmund Freud. Like I said before, you know, this is al-hikmatu dalatul mu'min, right? So we have the right over it. He was very heavy emphasis on dreams. He said dreams are the road to the subconscious. Now, we know from an Islamic perspective, Ibn Sirin, rahimahullah, he's done a lot of work on dreams. We know that from an Islamic perspective, dreams can be of three types. Dreams can be either those that, if it's a scary dream, it's from shaitan. If you wake up and you're afraid, it's a scary dream, Prophet ﷺ said, you should forget about it, say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, go back to sleep. Don't talk about it, don't think about it, forget about it. The second type of dream is what's called hadith an-nafs. It's your mind talking to itself. It's a conversation that happens internally. So for example, if all day long you were traveling on a train or a bus, right, and you go to sleep that night, in your night you're going to be traveling on a train or a bus, right? Because the mind is still talking to itself. If you were in a wedding all day and you were hearing some music, in your dream you're probably going to be in a wedding. If you were talking to some girl all day, in your dream you're going to be seeing the same girl. That's the mind talking to itself. So we can't do anything about that dream. The third type of dream, which can happen, is the dream that comes from angels and comes from Allah. And that dream gives us access to the Lawh Mahfuz. That dream can give us something about the future. It can tell us something about our subconscious mind, but it has to be interpreted. It is not a it's not a exact picture of what it should be. And for that, Ibn Sirin has a wonderful book on it, and others have written on it as well. Sorry, Fatima, you have a question?
Sir, since we're talking about dreams, could you define sleep paralysis, or why does it occur? And what is that state of mind? I mean, I faced it a few times and I don't think it's a pleasant feeling.
So sleep paralysis is like when your muscles, you're not able to move your muscles in your sleep, or you think you're in a state of sleep, but you might not be in the state of sleep, right? So, for that, you have to understand that sleep exists in the different states. If you study, if you pick up any psychology book and look up a chapter on sleep, you'll see that there's different stages of sleep. And at each stage, there are different experiences that a person can have. And for some people, that some of those experiences are more profound. Now, sometimes sleep paralysis can happen because of physiological reasons, like some part of the brain that's not functioning as well as it should be, or physiological something's wrong. Sometimes psychologically, people who have trauma, for example, can experience sleep paralysis, and also what's called like hypnagogic or hypnopopic hallucinations. So like they might think they're awake, but they're not awake, or they have an out-of-body experience when they wake up. So there could be many physical or psychological reasons behind that as well. But going back to the dream part, we have to understand that there are dreams that are true. Okay, so I want to jump back to the topic again. So, another question? Go ahead, Hamza. I think he's muted.
Sir, there is a question from Hamza Khan. Hamza Khan,
Yes.
you are requested.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Wa alaikum salam. Go ahead.
Sir, previously you talked about two things, that one side we have Quran and the other side we have rationality or scientific knowledge. So in that purpose, I wanted to ask that if there is something that is in the Quran, but our mind does not accept and we are not able to understand that. So are we allowed to question that?
Oh, absolutely, we are allowed to question it. We are allowed to question it. We're allowed to investigate it. We're allowed to ask the scholars. We are allowed to ponder upon it. That's what Quran asks us to do. Quran asks us to do, like, if the Quran is asking us to reflect on our surroundings, right, on the signs of Allah, of course we can question it, right? Now, we accept Quran as the word of Allah. We accept it to be true. Now, this is where that other discussion comes in. Like, what if there's a contradiction? Then what do you do, right? So you question it. You try to understand. Maybe there's a different interpretation. Maybe you misunderstood. Either that which is in your mind has to be reinterpreted, or that which is in the Quran has to be reinterpreted. Maybe this reconciliation has to happen. Sometimes two things can happen. I'll give you one example. This example is mind-blowing. It blew my mind when I first heard about it, right? There's an ayah in the Quran, and I can't remember which ayah it is, but it says something about sab'a thamawat wa mithlahun, that there are 7 heavens and skies and like thereof, and others like them. So I think Ibn Abbas or Ibn Umar, I think it was Ibn Abbas, was asked about the interpretation of that. What does that mean? First, he declined. He didn't answer the question. He said, if I told you the real meaning behind this ayah, you would lose your faith. Okay. Then he was asked again and again. He finally said this, and this is quoted in the books. He said, 7 earths, and in each earth there's an Adam like yours, an Ibrahim like yours, and a Muhammad like yours. He's talking about parallel universes. You know, it blows your mind to think that there's a possibility of parallel universes, right? Now, I'm not saying that this proves that, oh, Quran talks about parallel universe. I'm just saying the idea that a verse can be interpreted differently as well. Our mind, our rationality can interpret it based on our time, based on our understanding, based on the data, the science that exists. You know, we have biases and heuristics in our mind. Heuristics are mental shortcuts that we take that allow us to stop thinking sometimes. So we have to question our own thinking at times too. We can, you know, sometimes somebody gives you an idea and we take that idea, just like I said before, we swallow it as a whole. The West gives us an idea or an ideology and we say, oh, this must be right. And therefore I have to then question, you know, what is being said. Question the Quran, but also question that idea. Question whether that idea is saying, who's saying that, based on what credibility, and why do I have to accept that as well? Just like you're going to question the Quran. Rahimin, you had a question too? Okay, I guess I'm gonna.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Walaikum assalam.
Sir, my name is
Raimin, you are requested to
Khan.
share your question.
Sir, my name is Raimin Khan. So, sir, to strengthen one's iman, the control over oneself, like nafs, that is an obligatory requirement. So, my question is, how do you think that psychology plays a role in this aspect of religion?
Okay, that's a good question. So now let's talk about human ontology for a second, right? How do we define what exists inside of us? I mentioned before that we know that there's ruh, we know there's nafs. You know, Imam Ghazali has talked about like aql, that we have aql inside of us. You know, we published a book last year from our center, Khalil Center, which we conceptualize the presence of emotions or ihsas inside of us as well. These are things that exist inside of us, right? The first and the most important thing that we can do for ourselves is become more aware. Okay, you know, there's an old saying that people say that Ali Salam said it, or the Rasul said it, Allahu Alam who said it, but it says, "Man arafa nafsahu faqad arafa rabbahu." Whoever becomes more aware of himself becomes more aware of his Lord. There's a verse in Surah Hashr, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. Don't be like those who forgot themselves, who forgot Allah, and Allah made them forget themselves. So Imam Ghazali in his Ihya, he mentions a hadith, which might be a da'if hadith, but it's a beautiful hadith. It says, إِذَا أَرَادَ اللَّهُ بِعَبْدِهِ خَيْرًا بَصَّرَهُ بِعُيُوبِ نَفْسِهِ. When Allah wishes good upon his servant, he gives him insight into his own deficiencies. The question you have to ask yourself is this: how do you know that you can be wrong, right? How can a person know if they're wrong? Like a narcissistic person who has kibr, who has arrogance, right? How do they know that they are wrong? The answer is you cannot know you're wrong by your own self. It is impossible for someone to know just by their own self that they are wrong. So Imam Ghazali says that if Allah, now the translation of that hadith was, if Allah wants something good for his servant, he gives him insight into his own deficiencies. How do you gain that insight? Imam Ghazali says that you can do it through different ways. One of the ways is that you can have a sheikh, like the Sufis have a sheikh. You go to the sheikh tells you, you know, this is a problem you need to work on. Another way would be that you have, you know, a rafiqan, aliman, sadiqan, someone who, a friend, or like this day would be maybe more of a therapist, because nowadays we have a very bad idea of who friends are. Our idea of friend is somebody who says yes to you. You know, oh yaar, like mujhe ye karna hai, you know, like I want to do this bad thing. Us ladki ko pasand nahi, ye, you know, sutta lagana, whatever it is. I don't feel like fasting. I don't feel like praying. Yeah, let's do it. That's not a true friend. A true friend is someone who will challenge you. Say, hey man, I noticed that you were doing this. You know, as your brother, I have to tell you, this isn't right. Just like he would tell you to me. The Prophet ﷺ said that a believer is a mirror to another believer, right? How can you be a mirror to another believer if you can't tell them about their own deficiencies? So Imam Ghazali said that the second way would be someone that you can trust who will tell you about your problems, who has knowledge in these matters. So modern day psychologist would be that individual. And then Imam Ghazali also said that you can also learn about your deficiencies through an enemy, because an enemy can tell you without any filter that, oh, this is what's wrong with you. This is what you're doing, which you need to work on. So gaining that awareness and that insight is the first and the most important step for us to achieve awareness into our own problems. Then even Allama Iqbal talked about this, and I just spoke about it on, if you go on the official Allama Iqbal channel on Facebook, just 2 days ago I uploaded a video on this whole model, the paper that I published on Tarbiyat Khudi. He talks about this, that when you're trying to become closer to Allah, the biggest encounter that you have is your nafs, like you mentioned, Sister Rahimeen, that like your nafs is going to be your biggest enemy. So how do you overcome your nafs? Imam Ghazali actually talks about several different ways. We call it the 6 M's of Imam Ghazali, right? He says that there's 6 ways you can better yourself, improve yourself, and we can go through all of them in detail as well. And then I'll come back to the question for Abdul Mu'id here. But there's musharata, which is setting goals, like you have set goals for yourself and what you're going to do and accomplish. Muraqaba, which is self-monitoring. Muhasaba, which is self-evaluating. Mu'aqaba, which is setting consequences for yourself. Mu'ataba, which is self-reprimand when you do something bad. And then mujahada, which is self-struggle. We'll talk about practically what those are. Abdul Mu'id, you can ask your question now.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. My name is Abdul Mu'id, sir. I just wanted to ask that how Quran highlights the importance of psychological well-being.
Oh, the Quran. Okay. Well, I just mentioned probably the one ayah which I love the most, which is, Allama Iqbal was asked this question by someone, where did you come up with the concept of khudi? Right? You all know about khudi, and he talks about khudi, and this is a beautiful framework that he has, right? Which is related to like yourself and beautifying yourself, making yourself to such a degree, khudi ko kar buland itna, right? Like he talks about this. So he was asked, how did you come up with this concept? And he quoted the verse which I just quoted from Surah Hashr, that don't be like those who forgot Allah and Allah made them forget yourself. The Quran talks constantly about having that awareness of Allah, knowing your Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, having that connection, deep connection with Allah, right? And internalizing that. Now, how can you internalize Allah if you don't, if our insides are already dirty, right? Allama Iqbal, another one of his poems in Farsi, he says that the reason I cry is because I'm washing my eyes so I can see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When he says, Ye Jannat Mubarak rahe zahidon ko, ke main aapka samna chahta hu, to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How can we expect to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with our dirty eyes, right? Our eyes are dirty, our ears are dirty, our hearts are dirty. So Quran constantly emphasizes this idea that we have to clean ourselves. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. Right? This is in Surah Shams, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by so many things. وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا وَالْقَمَرِ ذَاتَ لَهَا وَالنَّهَارِ ذَا جَلَّاهَا وَاللَّيْلِ ذَا يَغْشَاهَا وَالسَّمَاءِ وَمَا بَنَاهَا وَالْأَرْضِ وَمَا طَحَاهَا وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا. After saying all that, to make one point, the most important point, which is قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. He who purified himself is the one who's a successful one. وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. And that he who didn't, he's the one that's lost, and that's the filthy one. Is Hanan, you had a question? Oh, I think Hanan is frozen now. So we'll wait until
yes, there is a question.
Oh, there we go.
Sir, in society like Pakistan, where people don't actually understand mental disorders, how does a person who's suffering from some mental disorder make this understanding as acceptance possible? How does he convince around him that mental disorder exists and they need help?
Right, that's a very good question. So, a lot of this has to do with awareness, right? We have to create awareness about what mental illness is, how that's different from other illnesses. People automatically assume that mental illness has to do with Iman, unfortunately. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. People sometimes, scholars will say, if you pray more, if you read more Quran, your depression will go away, okay? Now, that statement is partly true. I'll tell you what part is true. If you read more Quran, if you're a wali of Allah, if you are so close to Allah, أَلَا إِنَّ أَوْلِيَاءَ اللَّهُ لَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. Right? Indeed, those who are the awliya of Allah, no fear, no sadness will touch them. But that is a prevention strategy, right? If you want to prevent yourself from being depressed or anxious, be closer to Allah. Get that closeness, be as close as possible to Allah. But if you have depression, right? Now, let's assume you have depression because of physiological reasons. Let's say you have depression because you have low vitamin D. Let's say you're a woman who had postpartum depression because of hormonal imbalance inside of your body. These are real depressions that happen, right? In the US, in the state that I live in, we don't get a lot of sun. Because we don't get a lot of sun, people are deficient in vitamin D, and that automatically causes depression. So can I sit here and make dhikr and dua? Is that dua is going to increase my vitamin D? It's not going to work. I have to go get vitamin D supplements and eat it. That's going to increase my vitamin D. So educating the people that make these comments is important. But remember one thing though, when someone disagrees with you, one of the problems that we have, this is also the problem between the scientist and the mullah, right? The mullahs don't want to hear the scientists don't want to hear the mullahs, unfortunately. When somebody disagrees with you, the answer to that is not to come back and give your point. You always have to first validate the wisdom of the Prophet ﷺ, even the Quran, right? Udu ila rabbika bil hikmati wal maw'idati al hasana. You have to use wisdom when you bring somebody to Allah. So you have to first validate. You have to say, you know what? You might be right. It's true that being better Muslims will protect us from some of these things. However, there does exist all these problems. There do exist all these problems in this world. There can still be depression. The Prophet ﷺ had a whole year of sorrow when his wife and his uncle passed away. This is the best, according to our aqidah, the best man who walked on this world, who had the strongest mind or the strongest physical body than any of one of us here. He had not 1 day or 3 days or 40 days of sorrow, not 1 month of sorrow. He had 1 year of sorrow. When he was burying his son, Ibrahim, he was crying. And the Sahaba asked him, you too, Prophet Rasul? And he responded beautifully. He said, you know, the eyes are shedding the tears and the heart is crying, but the tongue will not say anything that will be, I'm forgetting the exact word, but something that will make Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala angry. So even the Prophet ﷺ felt sadness, okay, and anxiety. And there's other examples from his life. You know, the father of Yusuf alayhi salam, he lost his eyesight. He cried so much that he became blind from crying. And these are real examples, right? So, you know, yes, it's true that you can strengthen your iman and that might help you with depression, but just by praying through that is not going to cure it. If the Prophet ﷺ can feel sad, we have the right to feel sad. Feeling sad is part of our existence in this world. Yes, I think Maria and then Hasib also had a question.
Sir, one of the questions you have answered beautifully, which was asked. So I will move towards second question, and that is, how do you define deja vu? Deja vu.
Okay, so that's, you know, to be honest with you, I don't know how to answer that question. I'm gonna have to say I don't know, because deja vu is a concept that is not studied in psychology. It's I don't want to say it's a pseudoscientific concept, but in the field of science, when they try to explain something. So deja vu, for people who don't know, it's when you have an experience and then you feel like you've had it again. So, you know, the scientists try to explain it by saying that the reason you feel like you have it again is because you just experienced it and your mind is kind of having a lag problem. You know, like how sometimes on Zoom, when someone's talking and then they freeze and all of a sudden they just go really, really fast, right? So that's what the mind is doing. From a psychology perspective, we don't deal with the issue of deja vu, so I don't have an answer to explain that. From an Islamic perspective, I have not done any research into this concept, so I apologize. I don't have an answer for that. I still have to answer that OCD question, so I will answer that as well. But Hasib, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Hasib, can you ask your question?
Yes, sir. I'm Hasib. So I have a question, like, as you mentioned about the purification of our inner self so we can see the God clearly. So the question is, how can we know ourselves, of our inner self, so we can become closer to the God?
Okay, it's a beautiful question. So let's go back to the 6 M's of Imam Ghazali that we talked about, right? So the most important M that you can probably take from my lecture and apply to yourselves, something that we should all do, is muhasaba, right? Is self-evaluation. Okay, so what is muhasaba? What is the easiest way to do muhasaba? Actually, let me just tell you why muhasaba is more important. Many of you can probably attest to this, and you don't have to raise your, maybe you can raise your hand if you want to tell me if this happens to you. How many people that, you know, all day long you're feeling okay and you're fine. Then you start getting tired and then it's time for bed. And as you're about to go to sleep, all of a sudden thoughts start coming to your head, right? You're like, oh my God, I have this exam due tomorrow. Oh my God, did I do this assignment? Where's my life going? Am I going to finish with this degree on time? Am I going to get married? Look at all the hands going up, right? This is a very common problem. This is a very common problem. Why does that happen? That's the question, right? Why does this happen to people? One of the reasons why this happens is because, let's say I go through my day or you know, my days doing like whatever I do, and I am struggling with some problem, right? I'm struggling with some questions, some dilemmas, existential crises, whatever it is. Like, where's my life going? Am I happy in my marriage? You know, am I making enough money? Or, you know, did I complete this assignment? All of these issues that are in my mind during the day, I can push them to the side because I'm active. My mind is all like, because of all the information going through my eyes and my ears, I'm constantly, you know, doing something. But as I'm about to go to sleep, my mind is getting tired. All the defenses are coming down. All the things that I push to the side, they come back to the forefront of the mind, right? I can't push them to the side anymore because I don't have the energy and I'm not busy anymore. So all of them keep coming back to the front of the mind and they bother us. One of the easiest way to deal with that is what Imam Ghazali called muhasaba, which is what our scholars say. Before you go to bed, take 5 minutes, and it's better if you do it on a journal. Okay, if you can get a, you know, any paper, it doesn't have to be a specialized journal, any paper, but or if you can't do it on a journal, do it in your head. Sit down for 5 minutes, think about your day, and do it consciously. So it's not something that, you know, don't wait for it to happen to you before you do this. Do this before it happens, and ask yourself, how was my day? What did I do today? Did I have a productive day? Did I pray today? Was I good to my family? Was I good to myself? Did I take care of myself? If I made any mistakes, I'm going to forgive myself for those mistakes that I made, because I'm a human being. At the end of the day, every human being can make mistakes. Every son of Adam is someone who makes mistakes, who sins. So let me forgive myself. Did somebody else harm me? Did my brother harm me? My friend harm me? Did they say something to me that was harmful, that was hurtful? Let me forgive them. For the sake of Allah, let me forgive them. Let me not have any malice in their heart for, you know, for them. Did I harm someone else? You know what? I should then do something about it. Okay. If they're awake right now, let me send them a message. Let me say, hey, man, you know, today I think I said something to you. I apologize. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be that way. I don't want to go to bed in that kind of manner. If you're married, you know, talk to your spouse. I always tell my couples, don't go to bed angry and mad at each other. Just talk to each other. Say, you know what, it's okay. I'm sorry. You know, we love each other. We'll talk about it tomorrow, but right now I don't want to go to bed angry. Do the muhasaba of your day, and then ask Allah for forgiveness. You will find that you will have a lot of comfort, a lot of relief in your heart. That's one of the easiest way you can deal with your existential anxieties at the end of the day. But Imam Ghazali, like I said, he mentioned other things as well. You can look this up. He talked about musharata, which is setting goals, right? So in the morning, you can set goals for your day. At night, you can find out if those goals were achieved or not. Muraqaba is self-monitoring, or also meditation as well. Knowing, you know, being able to ground yourself. Right now, we have so many different distractions happening to us. You know, our phone is the biggest distraction that we have, unfortunately, right? You know, one of the best things you can do to yourself in your phone is turn off the notification. I stopped looking at how many corona cases are happening in this world. The news, I don't even look at the news anymore. My home screen is extremely simple. I only have like few pieces of information on there and nothing more. All the apps are hidden. I try not to engage myself in anything that I don't need to worry about. You know, I don't have to worry about all of these things. So keep those distractions away. Try not to watch. You don't have to keep up with Ertugrul. Trust me, it's okay. You know, the Khilafat Usmaniya was done. You know, it ended in 1923. You're okay. You'll be fine without it. You don't have to keep up with the new dramas. You know, whatever is happening in Ramadan. I think there's a new serial like Chupke Chupke or something, right? People are crazy about. Don't worry about it. It's okay. Your life will be fine. You don't have to keep up with all of these things. Okay. The YouTubers that you follow, or the TikToks, you might have missed some TikToks. All of these cause anxieties. Okay. So that is muraqaba, monitoring yourself and how these things affect us. We don't realize how these things affect us, not only consciously, but subconsciously. And then he talked about other things like muhasaba, I mentioned. Muaqaba is like setting consequences, that if I watch too much TV, then I'm going to have to do something else to pay for that. You know, I'm going to have to go do some exercise. I'm going to have to read some Quran, read a book. I'm going to go have to spend some time taking care of my family. And then reprimanding yourself, and then also mujahada, struggle. Ramadan is the best example of mujahada. Our nafs, which is our biggest enemy, Allama Iqbal said, your nafs has these qualities. It's khud parast, khud sarast, khud savar, and khud parwarast, right? It's self-conceited, it feeds itself, self-governing. So, mujahada of the nafs, Ramadan is the best time. We keep sleep and food, which is the most basic entities. But keep in mind, though, Imam Ghazali said that fasting, at the simple level, is just food and water, and then if you're married, like intimacy, you keep those three things away. But he said sawmul khusus, for the special people, the fasting also entails that you protect your limb, your tongue, your mouth, your eyes from committing evil deeds, which doesn't break your fast, but it is the second level of fasting. The third level of fasting, he said, sawmul khusus al khusus, is that one where your heart is completely aligned with Allah all the time. You don't think about anything else but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the real fast. So that is going to help us defeat our nafs. I know, I think Javeria had her hands up too.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. I have a question. Is there any research or reference that claims human behavior can be predicted from emotions in a prior moment?
Human beings can have what emotions? Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Is there any research or reference that claims human behavior can be predicted from emotions in a prior moment?
Oh, that you can
like due to any situation, like sir, due to any situation, how the human being behavior can be changed. Like for example, like if there someone is facing that his mother or father is died, so that how he will act like sometimes it happen now that they can't bear this loss and they behave like abnormally.
Oh, so I mean, whenever a human being suffers or goes through an experience which might not be normal
Yes,
for the
sir.
human being, that experience will cause, for some people it could be traumatic, we call that trauma. For other people it might just be like sadness. Like for example, when somebody dies, right, like I said, the Prophet ﷺ had a year of grief, but some people have grief, they have 3 days or 40 days or however long it is. Some people have so much grief that they become psychotic, right? They hallucinate, they see things, they hear voices. So absolutely. So if that's what you're asking, that experiences that we have that are not normal in our life, emotional experiences or emotionally challenging experiences can lead to behaviors that are abnormal. That is absolutely fine. This is why when somebody comes to us as psychologists and they tell us that, oh, we have been experiencing this behavior, one of the first things we ask is, did something happen? Right? Something must have happened to cause this. If nothing happened, then we go back to the history, childhood history. Did something happen in childhood? A lot of times people don't talk about it in the beginning, but after a few sessions, they say, oh yeah, when I was young, I was sexually abused, or, I was physically abused, or I moved a lot, or some kind of thing that happened that is causing them to behave a certain way. Yes, Hasib, you also had your hand up.
Sir, there is a question.
Yes, I want to ask something.
Yes.
From which place I can get 6M as Imam Ghazali explained, so I can read more?
If you email me, I can send it to you. So I can share. I can't message all of you, but if you go on my Facebook, just look me up on Facebook and just message me through there. I can share that document with you. Khalil Center is my organization. I know they said Al Khalil organization, but it's Khalil Center. If you go to Khalil Center's Facebook page, I think there was something shared on there as well that you can find something. But if you look it up, if you look up all this terminology in Ihya al-Ulum and his other books like Kimia Sa'adat and stuff, he mentions all of this in there. Yes, Shagufta.
Sir, I have a question.
Sure.
Assalamualaikum, sir.
Walaikum salam. Yes.
Sir, I have a question. Is overthinking or over thoughts have a relationship with depression? Like, I think it's good that thinking is right, but overthinking sometimes, what is the purpose of Jannah? Why this kind of kainat has made up, and this type of question. When we feel normal, we cannot think like that.
Okay, it's a good question. So I think earlier the question was asked about obsessive compulsive disorder. So I will talk about that here too, because obsessive compulsive disorder is a disorder of thinking as well. So, our mind goes through thinking. It's a natural process. Whenever something happens, whenever we experience something, something goes through our senses, a thought produces in our mind. In fact, our scholars have identified different levels of thought. They have said, the most basic level of thought, they call it hajiz. And then they say khatir. Hajiz is a thought that is passive thought. It comes and goes by itself. Then khatir is a thought that you give attention to, and then you bring it to your mind, you think more about it. Then the third level, they say, so for example, to use an analogy, if I was walking and I saw someone's wallet or someone's money on the floor, I have a thought, a passive thought that, oh, maybe I should, or in your case, like what you said, I'll use that example, like, like a thought that somebody might have that, oh, did Allah create this universe? That maybe a passive thought comes. Now, if I pay attention to it, it would become a khatir. I would take it into my mind and I might start thinking more about it. The third level, they say, is hadith al-nafs, which is when your mind starts to talk to itself. Did Allah create universe or didn't create universe? Did he create, didn't create it? And then after that, they say the fourth level is ham, and then the fifth is azam. In ham, you start inclining towards one, and in azam, you kind of have a more strong inclination to even behave according to that thought. So what we have to do now, this is different for OCD. Someone who has obsessive compulsive disorder, they have a problem of thinking. This doesn't apply to them. But for someone like you and I who may not have OCD, we have to recognize that if we have a passive thought that we know it's negative, the thought itself doesn't serve a purpose. Like, did God create universe or didn't create universe? Is there a hereafter or isn't there a hereafter? These kind of questions. If it doesn't serve a purpose in that moment, then we need to let it go. Now, the comment that you made is it related to depression? Absolutely. Depression and anxiety feed each other. In both depression and anxiety, there's a tendency to overthink. In depression, people are usually thinking more about the past mistakes that they made. In anxiety, they're usually thinking about whatever's going to happen in the future. But the thought process is almost always there. So that always exists, unfortunately. But what we have to do is we have to recognize that if the thought doesn't serve any purpose to us, we have to let it go. In the case of obsessive compulsive disorder, somebody has a problem where they think, and based on that thought, they have anxiety. And because they have anxiety, they keep doing things. So a thought comes to their mind, my hands are dirty, or maybe I didn't pray correctly. So they have anxiety. So what do? They keep repeating some behavior. They keep washing their hands over and over again, keep making wudu over and over again, keep praying over and over again, keep checking the doors, keep checking the stove, something like that. Now that's a thought disorder. That's a problem of anxiety. That's a disorder. In that case, using medication helps. There's a treatment for it, which you should go see a psychologist. I can't tell you what to do because it's not something that's easily explained in 2 minutes. But that's different than a normal thinking behavior.
So there is a question. There is a last question due to time constraint.
Sure.
We have a shortage of time. So there is a question: is the issue goes with someone's mother? She feels a very abrupt and squeezing situation. It seems like that something is holding her life in fist. She feels very tired, and at that time she goes for recitation. How can we relate this situation with Islam and psychology? How to overcome this situation?
Wait, I'm sorry. I didn't. You have to explain to me slowly. Like, what did you say? What were the symptoms you said about somebody's mother?
She feels a very abrupt and excusing. Like it seems that someone is holding her life in fist.
Okay.
She feels very tired.
Okay. So, I mean, these symptoms seem like they're like anxiety or depression related issue. So the thing is that if the depression or anxiety is at moderate level or low level, just therapy, counseling alone is very, very helpful. And you should go see a counselor. Like Imam Ghazali had said, having somebody in your life like Rafiqan Salihan, who's a good, kind companion is good to have. I have a psychologist myself. Alhamdulillah, I don't have I have some anxiety that I've always had, but I don't have a diagnosable disorder. I'm a very high functioning individual, alhamdulillah. But I still see a psychologist every Tuesday. I'm not afraid to talk about it or share with people because there's no shame in having somebody that you can go and discuss your problems with and get some guidance from. So, if it's a mild or moderate depression or anxiety, see a psychologist. If it's extreme, then you might even need to take medications and you have to see a psychiatrist for it. But these seem like almost like symptoms of anxiety and even some depression. But I don't want to diagnose people because it's not that simple to just give a diagnosis. You have to know a lot more. But just on the surface level, they kind of seem to be symptoms of depression and anxiety.
Thank you so much, sir, for your time and such a great experience here. And now we will have to end the question answer session due to shortage of time. Over to you, Maria.
Thank you, Hanan. Thank you so much, sir, for such an amazing talk. It was really an amazing and informative session, and we feel really honored to have you on board. So thank you so much, sir. Now, I would like to invite Ma'am Fazaila, Director of Student Affairs, to have thank you note.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much, Maria. And thank you very much, University Protocol Society, for putting up such an informative session. And now I would extend my heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Saab for coming over on this platform, this e-platform, and enlightening our student with this, such a beautiful talk and clarifying them on certain phenomena about Islam and science and psychology. I'm sure from this session today, our students must have learned quite a great deal. And we also hope that we'll be having you in future as well. Inshallah, we'll keep inviting you, and you will be kind enough to show up again, inshallah ta'ala. The topic was really good, as well as thought-provoking. Basically, that could provoked. I mean, that provoked my thoughts on certain things as well. For example, here I remembered a beautiful hadith say, Qudsi, where Allah Ta'ala Bazuban Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that Kuntu kanzan makhfiyan fahbabta an orafa, that I was and I am I was a makhfiyan, I mean a treasure. You see, kanzan makhfiyan, I was a hidden treasure, and I liked to be revealed, and I liked to be discovered. So from here we can derive that Allah Ta'ala, and we also know that even in Quran and Pak, Allah Ta'ala keeps inviting us for research, for making discoveries, and science is, of course, science is one of the tools or sources for gaining knowledge about about these concepts about Allah Ta'ala and His creations and His creature, and because Allah Ta'ala is sift of khalaki, like His Khalik, His creator of everything. So he wanted this to be manifested upon His creature. So that's why He conferred us with akal and ilm, all these blessings. But these akal and ilm are again limited, so that's why there are certain concepts or phenomena that science wouldn't have answer for. So the reason is that Allah Ta'ala has blessed us with ilm and akal in limited way. So certain phenomena again goes beyond our limited knowledge, and so He's the only one who is all-knowing with perfect knowledge. So, and in Ayatul Kursi, I remember a verse in Ayatul Kursi where Allah Ta'ala said that وَلَا يُحِيطُونَ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنْ عِلْمِهِ إِلَّا بِمَا شَاءَ, and the translation goes that, and they compass not a thing of His knowledge except for what He wills. So, and I remember once somebody saying that these Sufis, that scientists could also be considered as kind of Sufis, because they are also on the journey of discovery Sufis, they take the relationship of heart with Allah Ta'ala and discovering Allah Ta'ala and reaching out to Him. And the scientists, they take the other path. They of course, they have to establish a relationship of head with the creator of this universe. And, so we must, the one take-home point from this session is that we must be open to knowledge, and we must, why Muslims are, not are facing, all these things today, which even Dr. Saab had a question about in the beginning of his speech. That was that Muslims, they have not into this quest of knowledge, and they have left their the miras, the lost miras, which about which hadith we also mentioned earlier. So we must be inquisitive, we must be having quest for knowledge, and we must relate ourselves with science and technology in order to understand better. And we also be understanding about our religion, the understanding of religion, the understanding of Quran, comprehending Quran, and comprehending Quran through its, in its, understanding its for its true spirit is equally important to understand all these concepts. So let's hope that Allah Ta'ala give us tawfiq to learn about our deen better, and to learn about everything Allah Ta'ala has created. With these words, I would extend my thanks once again to Dr. Saab. I'm sorry I was not feeling well enough. Inshallah Ta'ala, next time we'll have a better, Inshallah Ta'ala, discussion with Dr. Saab. And thank you so much once again, all of you, for being here. And Allah Hafiz.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for sharing your views with us.
My pleasure.
So, thank you so much, everyone, and a special thanks to our guest speaker, Dr. Fahad Khan, and Ma'am Muslim Mastoor, Head of Psychology Department, Air University. We know your time is precious, and we are grateful you shared some of it with us. Thank you, everyone.
With this, we conclude this session. Take care and Allah Hafiz.
Assalamu alaikum.